Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Real Point of View. My name is Greg Morgan, and I am the Real Movie Guy on Twitter. I'm the Real Movie Guy, period. And it's just this love and aesthetic love for movies. Love it all. Well, joining me today, as in many cases in the more recent past especially, is to the other side of me is Mr. Stephen C. He's a man that doesn't pick a bad movie. And down below is none other than Karen D, the movie maven herself. And I don't know what she thinks about picking good or bad movies. I'm sure she has an opinion.
No, not tonight.
She looked at both of these movies and were like, I haven't seen either one of them. Okay.
No, I've seen both of them. I saw them both today.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Well, why don't we get started? Steve and I were talking about the movies that we were talking about tonight. The movies that we're talking about are January Man and November Man. And I had seen January Man many years ago, and Steve and I were just talking about Pierce Brosnan and all this stuff, and he said, "Hey, have you seen November Man?" I'm like, "No, I know it exists, but I never saw it." So that's what kind of started this whole thing off. And so I thought, hey, why don't we do November Man and January Man together? And then I realized as I was looking at a few trailers here and there that they actually had some similarities. So I thought, hey, might make for a good episode. So here we are, and we're going to talk about January Man and November Man. We have in January Man, we have Kevin Kline, and in November Man, we have Pierce Brosnan. Now, these guys are very different actors. Kevin is more of a, melodramatic, dramatic actor. And Pierce Brosnan is pretty much very serious, on point, pretty much all the time. I think the last time he told a joke was on, what was the TV show? Remington Steele. I think it was the last time he told a joke.
No, he told jokes in Mamma Mia. That just came out this week, Mamma Mia 2, and he was in Mamma Mia 1 too. He was in Mamma Mia and Mamma Mia 2, and he told jokes in both. He did the comedy. Just saying.
In a serious drama, he didn't tell any jokes in a drama.
You're a drama.
Okay, so a guy can be wrong like all the time, obviously. So I'll take that hit.
Sorry, it's just that I didn't say they were good jokes. They were probably terrible jokes.
Please, no tomatoes with rocks in them, please. If you're going to throw tomatoes, throw carefully. Okay. And we won't talk about the other tomatoes because it's our opinion that counts here today. Okay.
Yeah, because those are run.
Tomatoes. Okay, so what is it about these two films that was a positive? Let's look at pros and cons. What's a good pro for this movie, Steve?
Which movie?
This movie.
The three of us are here. That's the pro for this movie. We would like to actually call it a short film. Thank you.
All right, I'm sorry. It's been a rough Friday.
The other positive is diversity. With this lamp that's right beside me, look at this shade of pale. We are breaking boundaries.
Oh my God!
Can
we put the boundaries back together?
I will give you a positive, in my opinion, for both movies. One of them, January Man. There's a lot of, I'm not going to say comedic genius, but there's a lot of very well-timed comedy, and the movie kicks off with very well-timed comedy and just some crazy over-the-topness that doesn't completely take over a scene and take you out of what's going on, but it helps elaborate more on the characters themselves. With November Man, it never stops being a serious undertone to the whole movie because what's going on is serious to every character involved, but with so many different characters, you see an evolution in the type of character that they actually are. From the hero, from the villain, trying to guess exactly what's going on, the lady who needs to be saved, everything. There's an evolution with every character, and they do a really good job of keeping the tone flowing with the evolutions of these characters.
Now, one of the cool things that I thought about both movies even initially was the fact that, in essence, we're talking about guys who have been in the forefront of the game. We'll say a police officer and a CIA agent, police officer in Kevin Kline in January Man, and an FBI, CIA agent for Pierce Brosnan in November Man. But here's a situation that they're both out of the game. And because of a certain thing that's occurring in each film, they're both kind of brought back in, one more directly and one less kind of indirectly. But both brought back in because now there's something that's going on that needs their expertise. I thought that was kind of a good parallel for these two films initially. So with those parallels, is it their keen essence of observation and they're just these really extraordinarily bright men who are in these movies, or is it their know-how because of situations they've been in? What is it about January Man that made them bring him back for this situation? I mean, he was kind of ousted a little bit in January Man, and now he's coming back because of the serial killer. And then in November Man, he's coming back because, you know, there's a lack of trust that's going on in some of these operations, and they need somebody who's kind of on the outside, but has the ability to still understand what's going on in the CIA. Any other parallels that you saw? Either of you?
I don't know. I mean, I guess to me, I did not particularly at all care for November Man as a movie. So I guess it's kind of unfortunate that we need to talk about positives because I didn't find very many. I didn't. I thought it was a really bad movie. But in terms of, I guess, some parallels, I think it is sort of intriguing the way that November Man, which was made 4 years ago, it was made in 2014, has some parallels sort of analogies to current events today. You know, the whole issue of, Russia, how, we're sort of playing this cat and mouse game with Russia. Are we in a Cold War? Are we in a real war? Who are we dealing with? We have these Russian counterparts that we're supposed to trust. I mean, Russia is a democracy in 2014, just like it is in 2018, but we still don't know who to trust. And we really can't trust anybody. And given some of the current events that we're dealing with today, I think that was fairly prescient. So that was interesting, but that's probably the most positive thing I can say about the November Man.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I would no. I'm interested in the negative side of it.
Okay, so what's the cons here?
Yeah,
guys?
I'm actually interested in the cons.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess I will just weigh in with, in my opinion, this was just a very tread-worn version of the spy genre. It was, I mean, I think James Bond movies were better because at least there was some camp. This movie took itself far too seriously. And I mean, other movies, I mean, there was nothing likable about these characters. I could care less about Pierce Brosnan. I don't care about him because there's nothing interesting about him. He's this guy who's on the outs and he's brought back in, but there's nothing particularly redeeming about his personality. He's a father. And I don't know why he bothered to father a child because he obviously doesn't have time for one. but so for some reason his daughter just loves him, and I'm like, why? He was never there. I hate the women in this movie. The women in this movie make me want to hurl, frankly, because every woman that Pierce Brosnan gets involved with, except for the first one who's killed, is really young, and there's a lot of gratuitous sex, and the women get called horrible names, even though they're all like 12. They're all like the age of 12. So it's like, really, there's not one woman over 40 who has a high-level job at the CIA. There's not one woman over 40 who's an assassin. I mean, the assassin drove me nuts. They had this supposed Russian assassin. They must have started training her at 5. And she was obviously a gymnast who only stretches on one side. I'm like, come on. If you're a gymnast, you stretch both sides. So that wasn't even believable to me, except for the fact that she probably was a gymnast. So, I mean, she obviously was very limber, but it's like that little thing about, like, with the splits and stuff, yawn, don't care. And I mean, it's like these people don't do anything interesting except run from bullets. I mean, I couldn't wait for the movie to be over. I thought it was.
I must admit, with regard to the assassin, in the beginning when Pierce Brosnan is telling the main character to get out of the restaurant, I thought that was so funny, because if I was an assassin, she'd already been dead way before she turned around. See him telling her to get out of there.
It's like, really?
And then it was almost like the assassin was sneaking around but not doing a whole bunch.
Right.
That part early on, I was like, man, I think I'd have to rewrite the screenplay on the assassin in the beginning, because she wasn't. She seemed like she was gonna be impressive, but it didn't hit me. I saw too many mistakes in that. If we're talking about the cons.
I also didn't believe the bromance between Pierce Brosnan and Luke Brahey. I can't remember his last name, but the co-star of the movie who played. I mean, he was his protege, and then became his nemesis, and then went back to being an ally. I'm like, really? Oh, okay. Whatever.
I do want to small interject in that. It seemed, even though they were against each other for the better part of the movie, it did seem like Pierce Brosnan, who was, as you can see from the very beginning of the movie, his mentor. And it seemed like he was still trying to educate him as the movie was going. He was giving him scenarios. He was talking him down like a person would talk him down. You're too far behind. You're not smart enough. You can't do this. Almost egging him on to motivate him to think more, to do better, to figure the situation out before Pierce Brosnan gets to that situation. The scene in the hotel room with the girl, it was a scenario that Pierce Brosnan at no point in time really planned on killing this girl, but he was, trying to get under the skin, trying to frustrate and trying to anger it to where his protege would make a mistake or would not be able to do his job. Understanding, are you human? Are you able to do this? Are you willing to make the sacrifices that is necessary for this job? And it did seem like, for the most part, that he was still a teacher to a student, educating him in, you can't get attached. You can't do these things. You don't get to have a life outside of this, because this is all there is, because people will come back and people will hurt you in ways that you couldn't possibly imagine. And that's kind of what I took away from the back and forth between the two.
But do you find that to be
the same thing? The movie opens with Pierce Brosnan remembering this woman that he actually cared about who gets killed, and somehow he's managed to have enough sex to create a child who he says he cares about. So I mean, I guess that's why I found all of that sort of
I'm pretty sure
tutelage hard to believe.
I'm pretty sure the child was the woman that died's mom.
Yeah.
Right, but he was her father, or he was acting as a father to her. So, well, I thought it was his biological child. But in any event, he's telling his so-called protege, if you want companionship, get a dog, which is like a sort of a knockoff of a famous line that runs around Washington circles when you first come to Washington. That's what's always said. If you or that it's kind of a knockoff, really, of like Wall Street, where Gordon Gekko character Michael Douglas tells Charlie Sheen, and if you want a friend, get a dog. Right. So now you've got Pierce Brosnan says, well, if you need companionship, get a dog, but he didn't get a dog. And he managed to set up alliances with people he cared about, which could be brought against him to hurt him, and which did. And it was okay for him to do that, apparently.
But was he being hypocritical, or was he trying to teach you and saying that these are the things that went wrong for me? I'm wondering,
it could be that. Also, there's no indication except for the fact that we know it from Pierce Brosnan's perspective, and then the couple people that know it after the fact, that they were actually in a relationship. There was nothing connecting outside except for, maybe two people other than those two that knew that they cared about each other, who they were together, and things like that, which you get as you're watching the movie. So he managed, and even his daughter, you could see her outfit. She goes to a boarding school. So you can see, during this period of time between the mission with his protege, between the wife dying, there's years in here where we don't necessarily know, but they are telling us that we need to know, which I can see where that would be an issue if you're not, if they're not giving you all the information you need, to where you don't understand their relationship, but we need you to know that he's kind of been there as much as he perceives it's possible, and she loves him for that. And the fact that she's at a boarding school, so he really maybe doesn't have the attachment of like names or things like that, to where she can't be traced back to him, which roundabout, blah blah blah.
You see how well that went.
Exactly. Now that was a very, you're right, there are a lot of by the book spy cliches in this movie. You are absolutely right about that. I will completely agree about the assassin, but it's so hilarious because every movie she's in, because I believe she was in Ghost Protocol.
Oh, she was.
Tom Cruise, Ghost Protocol. She plays the exact same person in every movie, and I think she has gotten herself to being typecasted.
Yeah, probably because she's a gymnast.
Probably. So, but
according to you, Karen, only part of her is a gymnast. The other
yes, only half of her is a gymnast.
The other half never gets stretched.
The other half is a couch potato. We know that. That's probably why she didn't react quickly inside the restaurant.
She only did half of
it. She was all gymnast. She didn't react. She quickly gotten her mark and Pierce Brosnan at the same time with the same. Obviously, but when you're only partially a gymnast and partially a couch potato, you can't even turn around correctly inside a restaurant that's not very crowded. And
there's some give and take. We all can't take after Vin Diesel movies when it comes to assassins. So
we could do a better job of trying to take after Vin Diesel movies.
Or Tango and Cash. Anyway.
Guilty pleasure.
So, going back to let's go back to January, man, for a minute. And we'll get through the other months as well. So, in January, man, what was it about Kevin Kline that made them feel like it was necessary for him to come back? I mean, there's no other police people in the country, let alone the city. Why does he have to come back to help us solve this serial killer crime?
They weren't going outside of New York City to solve, and that wouldn't be typical police procedure unless you brought in the FBI, and this was these crimes occurred within New York City, so you wouldn't bring in the FBI, and the FBI wouldn't have jurisdiction or wouldn't take jurisdiction. So it would make sense to. To me, that's something that wasn't explained at all. So it's like, no, there are plenty of other people that they could have gone to, but then I guess there wouldn't have been a movie. I don't know.
They also, for some reason, there's little underlying like things where they view him not completely. I'm not even comparing him in any way, shape, form, or fashion to that person. It just to pin it on somebody. They believe he's kind of a Sherlock type character.
Right.
Brilliant mind where even though he's been shamed and kind of kicked out, that he still has the mind to do this, and they've run out of options. I mean, there's literally a guy who's been terrorizing New York for 11 months.
Right.
So they're like, we're not making it to a year. We're not doing it. Bring me my brother.
Also, the victim was a friend, a best friend of the mayor's daughter. The mayor's daughter.
Right.
So then it got personal in the way that unfortunately the other murders didn't become personal, but this one was. I remember going to the movie. Now, to me, the other comparison, I will say at the risk of being a dead horse, between January Man and November Man is that November Man came about 25 years later, and I think that proves that things don't get better with age. The January Man was a much better movie. Much better acting, much better fleshing out of characters. And that doesn't mean it was a great movie. I don't know that January Man was a great movie. I wouldn't call it a great movie. But
a good movie.
It was a good movie, and it was more fully formed and felt more cohesive. It wasn't just one note. I'm a spy and I'm gonna get bad guys and I'm surrounded and everybody around me could be bad or could be good, but they're really bad. And how many people do I kill, and how many women do I get to have sex with, and blah blah. And now that said, I think the casting of women in January Man was also not, typical stock characters, and all the women needed to be saved mostly. So that was boring, but
it was very James Bondish, yes,
and boring. That's one of the things that makes James Bond's movies boring. But Alan Rickman, it was really fun to see Alan Rickman in this, really goofy role, because he does villain so well. And it was really, and Rod Steiger, who really just came on full bore as this over-the-top mayor, was also really fun to watch.
I'd like to say something about Rod Steiger's character. When he was sitting in the office before the police chief guy came in the room and then started yelling, I realized that, one, I noticed that I had a flashback to In the Heat of the Night. Okay, not even just the S's, but when he comes into the room, when the police chief comes in the room, Rod Steiger's feet are on the desk. So that was the first sign. And then when he starts yelling at him and they're cursing and he's speaking Italian and he's throwing all this stuff at Rod Steiger, he gets up and goes, "Oh, not you too, boy. Oh no, you too, boy." And I'm thinking, the only thing missing here is the money that Virgil Tibbs showed him. He was going to pay for the call. The badge laying on the desk, because he jumped up and he said almost exactly. It felt like it was verbatim. And I was thinking, Chief Gillespie is a mayor. This was the future of Chief Gillespie. He had gone and become. He's no longer Chief Chief of police, we can tell because that's who he's yelling at. He is now the mayor, Mayor Gillespie, and his daughter.
I want to talk to the writers.
I was like, whoa. Well, the one thing about that was we knew he could play that part well because we had seen it before.
I want to go talk to the writer and see if this was a sequel to In the Heat of the Night.
Either that or the same writer, thinking he could get away with it. That's the thing.
That would actually be probably the most hilarious thing I've ever heard.
I was like, what? Wait a minute. I'm like, well, if George Jefferson can make it to the East Side, why can't Chief Gillespie?
I didn't remember Chief Gillespie being that over the top and In the Heat of the Night.
He wasn't, but that's because he's not as old as he was. He was a younger man back then. But it's like, I remember him throwing the badge after talking to the other police officer, throwing the badge down and goes, "Oh yeah, boy, oh yeah." And then seeing him do that in this, I was like, wait a minute. Am I watching the right movie? Because this is, I thought it was like the, like you said, like the sequel to In the Heat of the Night, or because there were sequels to that too. They called him Mr. Tibbs and all that good stuff. And I was thinking it was January Man that I didn't remember seeing when I was watching the sequels.
There is zero connection I can find, there's zero connection I can find between the two. So
because there isn't one.
Because there is no connection, but he may have seen it, and when he saw it, he went, "That's my guy."
And what's with like the actual serial killer in blackface that no one seems to notice or mention in the movie?
Well,
I mean, really? It was like 1989, and I guess that was okay. But I mean, usually if somebody does something like that, it at least merits a mention. Not one person, not one character mentions it at all during the entire movie. Oh, he's in blackface. Is this a black guy or a white guy? I think he's a white guy, but he's in blackface. No, not a word. Nary a whisper.
Best I can figure is it's a comedy beat that they were going for, that they could not, that somebody found it funny. Somebody found it amusing that there's this guy that's blackface running around God's gifted green earth, and nobody goes, "That guy." Like, just kind of that underlying.
Or nobody says, we think, there's the classic sort of, especially I can remember when there was some major crime occurring in Boston. Oh, well, I can remember when a husband ended up being charged with killing his wife, but when they first questioned him, he said the black guy did it. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe it's some sort of homage to that, because it's always the black guy, right? Except that no one said a word. So I'm like, why even go there? And then, of course, when they unmask the killer, they've managed to wipe most of the blackface off. And I'm like, okay, well, this doesn't make sense. Now, when they have time to do that? I'm sorry, that's just bizarre.
No, I'm assuming somebody found it funny, or
they were wrong.
There was a faux pas where they were like,
"Oh,
they'll take it out in editing."
We forgot to take the blackface off of our white guy killer. We forgot to remember that it's not that funny. What? Really? No.
I mean, honestly, if they would have done this in Naked Gun, it would have been hilarious.
If they had done it in Naked Gun, it wouldn't have gone unmentioned.
That's true too.
That's true too. That
is very true. Like, they did a really good job of talking about everything, but not getting off topic.
Exactly. They really did. But I thought the comedy was okay. I thought Susan Sarandon was a far more interesting character, and what Kevin Kline saw in Marianne Mastrantonio, except for the fact that she was younger and apparently easy, I don't get.
That sounds like a.
Well, I mean, there's the tie-in, of course, because it's her friend that got killed in the beginning. So.
Right.
What does that have to do with her being interesting? Nothing.
I don't.
She wasn't an interesting character at all. Yawn, yawn, yawn.
So, what was really wrong with these movies? Not enough.
Hold up.
Not enough depth of character. Not enough. In January Man, not enough cliched. Well, in either movie, not enough cliche essence to.
I feel like Karen's gonna say
Karen's
that.
doing the yawn right now.
I know. I feel like Karen's gonna say that.
Which movie was that for, Karen?
For both of them.
I just feel like Karen's gonna say that the major thing wrong with November Man, probably casting, and the fact that they went to spy movie. They basically it was, hey, we got Pierce Brosnan, let's make a James Bond movie. And they kind of did that without it being James Bond. I mean, if you go back and you look, GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, it's pretty par for that, except it's a more aggressive agent. It's a more aggressive James Bond in these movies, in which I could kind of see why.
Well, you know what this is, and I can't recall right now the name of the actual movie, but this is it's like melding more than one movie into one big movie.
Uh-huh.
This reminded me partially of Robert Redford and Brad Pitt when they were, mentor and mentee in their film, which was CIA, covert operations. And then you have the Taken, the kidnapping the girl, getting her out of there, and all this kind of stuff. It was kind of a movie that was 2 or 3 movies put together. And that in itself makes it harder to follow and kind of a crazy, erratic essence in the film. Maybe that's part of it. Because when I was watching it, it reminded me, I can't think of the movie right now, but it reminded me of Robert Redford and Brad Pitt.
If the November Man is sort of James Bond-esque, it's a poor homage to James Bond. And I'm no fan of James Bond movies at all. It would be a form of torture to make me sit and watch them. But I will say that at least with the James Bond movies, there was always kind of like this wink and a nod to the audience. So we were let in on like the caper. Right. And so, so there was an effort, however, inconsistent the effort might have been over the series of films, and some movies were definitely better than others, some Bonds were better than others. There was this effort to sort of just say, hey, I got a secret, I'm letting you in on it, let's go, let's run. No effort whatsoever with that in November Man, as far as I'm concerned. And that's what I mean by this movie taking itself far too seriously. It's like, oh my God. I mean, come on. If you could dodge bullets that much, you really would be made of steel. You really would be Superman. So can we like take a chill pill here and like have a little bit of like, just sort of like, I don't know, something to say, okay, you're with me. This is a movie. We're kind of having fun. Can we have like one of those, like a moment like that in there? And we can't, because the movie's just so serious, and we've got to get the Russians, but we're all bad, but we could be good, but we're really bad. And, it's like, oh, whatever.
I actually got to say, that's one of the things I like about this movie. I like the fact that I like the fact that it has a serious tone to it. I like the fact that when it pushes that button, it really doesn't let up. Now, I completely agree with you on, several things that you mentioned about the movie and ways that the movie could have been way better. But it's very rare that you get a movie that takes, as much as it takes itself too seriously, that sits there and plays the serious tone and says, this is every level, this is serious topic. So as much as there should be a break somewhere where we break it up for the audience or we break it up we're not going to. We're going to really, hunker down, and everybody's going to have to be pretty mean. So I actually kind of like that part, that aspect of it. But that's why we're critics. That's why we do this, so we can get on here and we can all express the opinion that we have. Plus, you talking about dodging bullets and everything, this guy grew up superheroes, grew up cartoons, grew up things like that. So when I see things like that y'all would find more, not realistic, for me, as much as it's not realistic, it's what I'm used to. It's what I've seen on show after show after show after show. It's what they've thrown out there all the time. So it's good to get y'all's opinions on things like this, because they're things that I don't notice.
And I guess for me, as much as I understand what you're saying, about growing up with that kind of stuff, but I think an unfortunate trend in movies, in all kinds of movies, is what I call the animation of humans in movies, in which characters are sort of like human beings are treated like animated characters, in that they can be thrown around, they can endure all kinds of violence, and and nothing happens to them. It's like, no,
which is true.
Not how it works at all. And why are you even throwing that out there? Because it gives people permission to sort of, be more callous, more cavalier with regard to actual humans. So I don't like that trend. That's one thing I really disliked about this movie, and not only this movie, but other movies that do the same sort of thing.
Cool.
Yeah, I guess I can see your point, Steve. I'm a comic book kid too. But even in the comic books that we watched, where there were fantastical things that were occurring, there was still that essence of brutality that showed finalization of something, the end of some villains in many cases, and then later on, more recent past, the end of some superheroes too. So I think that element is still there, but we're looking at films that are really more the realms of realism. And in this November Man, that era of realism, that CIA, that covert essence, we know that people get shot, people get killed, and it's just when there's a myriad of bullets, unless you're Power Man, Luke Cage or something, you should have got hit a couple times. At least a couple times. So I can see that point. But at the same time, I can be somewhat empathetic to the superhero who are larger than life, and they're not going to get slowed down by this barrage. That's just something that's in the way of what they got to get done and go do. So I get that. Well, we've only got a few minutes left, you guys. With regards to these